I believe our recording is now underway, so good afternoon and welcome everyone to the first Business Environments lecture for this term. Um, for those of you who might not know me, my name is Dr. Akwal Sunner. I have very recently just finished my PhD at the University of Strathclyde here in Glasgow and focus specifically looking at business contexts and ecosystems and looking at how strategy unfolds in these contexts. So that's really my background. But today, you're here because you want to learn about what makes the business environment and why it's important. So here's a little bit of a session outline in terms of what we will be covering today. And we'll start by defining business. So what do we mean when we say business? Okay, what is business? And I think it's one of those questions that, everyone thinks they know the answer to it, but when it's asked explicitly, you can sometimes struggle to explain what business is. So we'll try to provide a definition. Why is business important? And there's more reasons than you might think as to why business is fundamentally important to how a country, an economy, or even international markets work. The inner workings of the firm. So not only looking at what we know as customers or outsiders, but also what we need to know if we look at the inside of a company, what goes on inside a firm. We'll also look at the firm's relationship with the external environment. So what shapes that relationship? What's important about the external environment that a business needs to be aware of it? We'll also understand a little bit around CSR, or corporate social responsibility, and we'll tie that in with human rights and internationalization. And then finally, as I said already, if anyone's attended the business ethics lectures that I also do, you will know a little bit about why businesses should be caring about these concepts and how organizational analysis through stakeholders and stakeholder mapping is fundamental to understanding the environment of a business. Okay, so that's a very, very quick walkthrough of the key elements of today's class. So without further ado, let's get started. So defining business. Now, as with anything, you can open a dictionary, and if you do, you will be given a fairly standard definition. So if you look at the Oxford Dictionary, and I did this last year, 2020, and this is the definition that was given in the dictionary. So it's a person's regular occupation, profession, or trade. Very basic explanation, really, of what a business is in the Oxford Dictionary there, perhaps not comprehensive, and maybe eludes some of the kind of more nuanced perspectives on business. We also have synonyms, so other terms that are used to explain business. So commerce, enterprise, line of work, commercial activity. All these terms really are used synonymously with the word business to explain vaguely similar concepts, okay? But what I want to do is, before I take you through some of the more academic or scholarly definitions, I want to open the floor out to you guys. What do you think? If I was to ask you, what is business? Can you define business for me? How would you do it? So if you could please either use the chat function or feel free to come off mute and share with me some of your thoughts around what you think business is, or how would you define business if I was to ask you today, what is business? I'll give you all a minute or two to gather your thoughts, but as I said, feel free to come off mute and share your thoughts, or alternatively post in the group chat, please.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hello there, yes. Someone trying to say something? Hello? No? Any thoughts in the chat? Anybody want to share any thoughts? Hazard a guess how you would define business? Come on, you're all doing a business course. You must at least have some sort of understanding of what a business is or how you would explain a business. So come on, talk to me. Tell me what you think.
Hello. Sorry, I'm driving here, so it's very difficult to maneuver.
Okay. No, absolutely. Please don't take your hands off the wheel. Feel free to concentrate on the road. There's no need for you to
Yeah,
participate.
okay. So I'm on hands free, so I can
Okay.
speak now. Yes, for me, business is an objective of, as you rightly mentioned, the definition in Oxford, a trade or any profession that brings in revenues and has a foreseeable future, a going concern, I should say. So has a going concern, and the aim is to maximize revenue and make profit.
Yeah, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Absolutely, I can understand why you would say that. So yeah, the profit maximization and revenue generation perspective is very true for a lot of corporate private enterprise. But then again, you also get social enterprise where perhaps revenue generation or profit generation isn't necessarily the sole purpose. However, that's a very good attempt to explain. There's someone that's posted in the chat that a business can be defined as an entity that's engaged in commercial or industrial professional activities. Yeah, 100%. So commercial, industrial, professional, absolutely. Those are just some of the sectors, and we'll look at industry sectors as part of today's lecture. So thank you. And we also have social and commerce industry. Absolutely. So as I was trying to mention there, so business doesn't always have to be of the private or the professional kind. Sometimes it can be for a social good. Some entities do exist to serve a social purpose and therefore not necessarily to make a direct profit. I mean, yes, they have revenue, yes, they have to cover their costs, but usually they exist to provide a social good or a social or cater for a social need. But no, that's good. Thank you for everyone who shared their thoughts. Appreciate you taking part. So how do we define it for us? Well, there's lots of different things that go into making a business, okay? Firstly, it tends to be something that's a decision-making entity. So what do I mean by that? A business tends to have functions, and in those functions, there will be some element of decision-making, whether it's a one-person sole trader operating out of a local shop store, whether it's a 1 million people or a 1,000 people company operating across the globe, there'll be some element of decision making. Okay, so a business is encapsulated by some form of decision making. It may or may not be for profit. So again, I was trying to make that point earlier when we were discussing what business is. You know, yes, in the vast majority of cases, 95% of businesses, yes, profit is the ultimate goal, the ultimate objective. However, there are some enterprises that do exist rather to make a profit to actually focus on providing a social good or to cater for a social need. Okay, so just be careful. Business does not always mean profit generation. That is just a byproduct. You could argue on a different type of business or a type of business that specifically operates to make profits. Business is involved in the exchange of goods and services, and this is quite important, okay? So what we mean by exchange doesn't always have to, again, mean for cash. Exchanging goods and services can also be the provision of goods and services. So that's quite important. In order for something to be categorized or classified as a business, there needs to be some sort of exchange going on, okay? You're either giving up your money to buy something, you're giving up your time to consume something. So it's all about an exchange, okay? So it's an exchange of goods and services, either for money and or other types of payment. Producing goods and or providing services. Again, that's quite related to the last comment. So a business will either provide a good or a service. If it doesn't do either of those, then by definition, we can't say it's a business, okay? It needs to either produce physical goods and services, or it needs to produce intangible, consultancy or providing, assistance with certain things. So a business is something that provides something to a customer, whether it's a good or a service. Okay. It exists to satisfy the needs and wants of people, organizations, governments, etc. Now, this is also quite important, but also self-explanatory in the sense that if a business does not satisfy the needs of customers, of the workers that are employed there or of other organizations that are in the supply chain, then you could argue, well, what is the point of that business? Why does it exist if it's not satisfying the needs and wants? And that can also be applied to social enterprise as well, okay? So social enterprises are there to provide a social good. If they're not providing a social good that meets the need of society, then what's the point in it being in existence? Okay, so social enterprise and private enterprise are both responsible for satisfying or meeting the needs and wants of others. Finally, enterprise. So enterprise, we've seen already because we said it was a term that's synonymous with business. So usually a business is an enterprise. It's a group of people that come together to tackle a specific objective. Now that objective could be to generate profit. Okay, it could be to work together and generate profit for a business. It could be to deliver a social good. It could be to care for example, elderly people. So again, you've got care homes which maybe don't always make a profit, but they are designed to provide a need for the elderly population. So again, they can all be classified as enterprises where groups of people come together to tackle a specific objective. And then finally, we have quality of output. And that is quite important because in any given business, the quality of output will always depend on the quality of inputs. So in a business entity, we can say that inputs determine or inputs define the nature of outputs, okay? So they go hand in hand almost. Good input equals good output, bad input equals bad output. And that's always the case, regardless of which type of business you're looking at. So these are just some of the characteristics as to what we could say goes into making a business. So how can we understand this? So sticking with the inputs and outputs perspective, in academic research or in scholarship, we define a business organization as being a transformation system. So you might be thinking, well, why transformation system? Well, basically, for us in the business world, and this is taken from Worthington and Britton's paper in 2009, they argue that inputs, whether that's resources such as land, labor, materials, enterprise, capital, combined with technology, combined with the people that work there, the managerial skills, etc., all of those being inputs, go into something that's like a mixing pot where everything is combined. Once that combination is realized, we're left with what is called output. Output can be in the form of goods, in terms of services. It can be in the form of ideas. It can be information. So more recently, big data and the idea that data has an important role to play in pushing businesses going forward. So these are all examples of outputs. Okay, goods, services, ideas, and information, and these are consumed. Now, they might not always be consumed by the same group of people. Food products, okay, they're consumed by almost everyone, but other types of products, if you are a luxury car producer and you produce Lamborghini Gallardos, for example, chances are you're only going to sell to a very, very small portion of the population, the very elite or the very rich people that can afford to buy your car. Whereas if you're a Toyota manufacturer and you're producing Toyota Yaris cars, the chances are your market is a lot more mainstream. You can sell to almost any person in any country who has got the finances to afford a relatively cheaper car compared to a Lamborghini. Okay, so thinking about consumption differs depending on the nature of the product or service. And ladies and gentlemen, that basically is a business enterprise or a business, okay? It's a transformation system. A business is something that takes inputs, it processes them, it does something to them, it organizes them, and then it pushes out or it spits out what we call outputs. And these outputs are usually in the form of goods and services, but they can also be stuff like new ideas, innovations, it can be information, it can be data, it can be things that are then used to further inform other areas. Okay, so that's one way in which you could attempt to define a business or define a business entity as a transformation system. Next up, we're looking at business functions. So we've talked about how the business works. Okay, we've looked at the transformation system as being critical for explaining the nature of business. What are the different functions that underpin the business entity? So these are just some of them, and this is just some of my thoughts that I put together here. So for example, on the left-hand cluster diagram, you've got departments or functions such as IT, accounting and finance, procurement, operations, supply chain, marketing, HR, human resources. You've got legal team, you've got customer services, you have a sales team, you could have administration team, production and manufacturing, supply chains. These are all different areas or functions of a business that need to work, maybe not always together, but certainly work in tandem. What do I mean by that? Well, if marketing are doing a big job trying to advertise and trying to get lots of sales, then the sales team needs to make sure that they're available to seal the sale, that they're trying to do everything they can to make the sale. If the sales team aren't pushing themselves and marketing are spending all this money on advertising, then what's the point? Okay, so they need to work in tandem. These functions, although they may be separate in how an organization is designed, they need to work together in order to function. Similarly, if the supply chain isn't working and you can't get deliveries to and from certain locations, then no matter how much you produce, how much you manufacture, it's just going to be sitting in a warehouse. It's not going to go anywhere. So again, supply chain needs to work in tandem with production and manufacturing and the operations of the business. Okay, so these functional areas, although they are designed separately, they need to work in tandem with one another in order to realize the benefits. The diagram on the right is taken by a paper, from a paper looking at strategy and strategic planning, okay, and how business functions come together. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because it's just there to give you an idea of how the different departments, in this case, finance, operations, and human resources, combine, okay? So what is the function and what is the operation of these areas? What do they do and how do they work together? If anyone's interested in learning more, this is not exhaustive. This is just an idea based on 4 of the different functions, but this paper is quite useful and the reference is there on the screen, okay? Strategic Planning and How Business Functions Interrelate by Amin Belembal, 2016. But even within that, and I apologize for the font here, it's not very clear, so I'll probably need to change the color scheme. But even within the business, we have what's called 2 faces or 2 brands almost of a business. We have on the left-hand side what's called a technocratic core. So this is all about technology, okay? Especially in today's day and age, any business at all, in order for it to be successful, it needs to engage with some form of technology, okay? It doesn't always have to be selling online. It could just be technology in terms of, processing a sale. For example, if a customer wants to pay by debit card, credit card, or any other type of payment that's not cash, then that business needs to have the chip and pin machine. That's a form of technology. That's a technocratic perspective. Okay, so by technocratic core, we're talking about the IT infrastructure. We're talking about business systems, ERP systems. We're talking about the processes and also the routines. Okay, they're also technocratic systems. So you might think, well, processes can involve people. That's true, but processes involve people doing something with technology in order to move an order, in order to progress an order to the next stage. So technocratic core is a combination of those things. Examples of that can be integrating. So again, what manufacturing are doing needs to be integrated with the operations team, who need to make sure that supply chain and logistics know when to deliver, what to deliver, where to deliver it to. After sales team then need to be advised that they know that there might be, if there's any potential issues, which customers might be affected. So again, there's different areas of the business that need to be consulted, that need to be discussing with one another. So it needs to be integration across the platforms. Another thing is quality. One of the biggest reasons why technology is adopted is to improve the quality of work, is to reduce mistakes, is to reduce human error is to boost the chances of a business getting it right first time. It's also about engineering. So again, if you're working in a manufacturing firm or you're in a production plant or manufacturing plant, you want to ensure that your products are the best, and you want to make them or produce them in such a way that it's not a drain on your resources. So engineering is a fundamental component of Technocratic Core. Innovation can be an output of technology, but also an input. Combining new technologies is a form of innovation. Using technology to gain a different outcome is also a form of innovation. Okay, so innovation is fundamental. Knowledge is key, and that's something that businesses are struggling with, because what tends to happen, particularly in more contemporary businesses, is one or two people end up becoming experts. They learn the program, they learn the system, they know everything about the system, they know how the system works inside out. But when they leave, particularly in manufacturing intensive jobs, when they leave, then they leave a void. There's a knowledge spillover, there's a knowledge loss, a knowledge drain on the business. How do you capture that knowledge? How do you make sure that that knowledge is kept within the business? Virtual networks, again, looking at how businesses now no longer need to work together on their own, but they can work together over virtual networks. So working over the internet, working over things like the Microsoft Office suites. Microsoft have got their own cloud, they've got OneDrive, you've got Microsoft Teams, for example. These are all collaborative platforms that allow you to work through networks that may be dispersed potentially all over the globe. You working in the UK could be working with someone in India, in China, in Australia, and the USA from the comfort of your own living room. This is all about creating these virtual networks. And these are only possible because of IT, because of a technocratic core. So that's one side. But then that's not enough to make a business a business. You also need what's called a sociosystemic core. And again, it's a bigger word, it's a big word, but all it really means is the structure of the business, the organizational culture, the practices and the processes of what people do and how they do them. And this can be quite difficult to explain and define, because each business has its own socio-systemic core. Okay, organizational culture can be very, very different from one business to the next. So in this context, we're talking about how does the organization shape itself? What is the culture within the firm? Are people responsive? Are people, catering of each other's needs? And then you've got the practices as well. How do things happen? What are the ways of working? How do people interact? How do people do their jobs in such a way that that the organization works? These are called your practices, your ways of working. Okay. Now, what are some of the socio-systemic core systems that we need to be aware of? Well, leadership. The nature of your leadership will influence what your business can and can't do. Leadership are responsible for setting the direction your business takes. If you have poor or weak leadership, then the chances are you won't necessarily achieve what you want to achieve. Governance. Now, again, I'm going to speak about governance towards the end of today's lecture as well, but those of you that attended my previous lectures on business ethics, you have a very strong understanding of what governance is. Governance concerns itself with doing what's right. It's about creating the frameworks, the systems in place and procedures such that things are done properly and accurately. Learning. So how you learn in a business. So this is beyond standard training. This is about how do people learn on the job. This is about how do people learn from one another. We've also got in here restructuring. So again, when a business goes through a big change management is obviously involved. You usually have a project manager, you have someone there responsible for overseeing the change. But it's not only that, it's also about how does the organization react? How does the organization cope with the change that's being implemented? And that will test the business's socio-systemic core. You've also got in here things such as chaos and complexity. Now, I think if you go back 10, 15 years, I'm not going to say business was different, but it was different in the sense that change wasn't as big a deal. And the reason I say that is because changes only ever came about once every 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Technology wasn't that great. Big changes to how a business worked weren't really forthcoming. Whereas you fast forward into this part of the 21st century, and nowadays a business changes almost every week or every month or every quarter. There's always something going on. There's always changes now a constant, okay? You can no longer call change as being something that's special or unique. Change has become business as usual. It's become a part of how an organization must work. It must always be responsive. It must always be able to adapt itself to what's going on in the external world. So change or complexity or chaos is something that we need to get used to. And the quicker a business can build that into what we call its sociosystemic core, the better positioned it will be to succeed when trying to implement big changes. So again, two sides of the business, just to reiterate the important points on this slide. The technocratic core, all about the technology, the IT, the infrastructure that holds the business together. And then the socio-systemic core, okay, all about the people. How does the communication, the interaction, the engagement, both with customers, internal staff, all of these things, how do they come together, and how does this influence what the business does? These are the questions that we need to consider when looking at the business environment, because both of these areas will have a big influence on what the business does and what the business is able to achieve. So what is the aim of a business enterprise? Now, again, we've always said that, profit generation is correct, but also not correct, because not all businesses, exist to make a profit. So what do they all exist to do? Well, every single one of these businesses exists to deliver on their strategies. Okay, now that strategy could be to maximize profit. That strategy could be to deliver an effective or efficient service. It could be to, for example, some businesses in the social enterprise space have a mission or a vision that they want to eradicate poverty in the country that they're operating. So again, these are all strategic visions, strategic directions, something that is guiding the business, something that's an end goal, a purpose, and an objective for that business to achieve. So every single business enterprise, regardless of what it does, whether it's for profit or for charity or for for social enterprise, it will exist to deliver strategy. Now, how does it do that? Well, here is where we bring in our socio-systemic and our technocratic perspectives. So at the very bottom, you've got what we call an energized and a productive technosystem or a technocratic system. So it's all about making sure your value chain is optimized. What do you mean by that? It means everything you're doing considers what is the value to the customer. Okay, so if you're doing a certain process, a certain routine, a certain addition to a product on your production line, the question you must always ask is, what is the value of that work that we're doing to the customer? How will this benefit what the customer receives, what the customer gets? Okay, so it's all about the value added or the value realized at each stage of the supply chain. We then have what we call exploiting research and development. So again, that's just about making sure that the technology that's there, we're constantly looking at ways to improve it. Just because you've got the latest technology today doesn't mean that's you set up for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Technology very, very quickly becomes obsolete, especially in today's day and age. New technology comes out, and we've seen that ourselves. I mean, how many of you have had a mobile phone for longer than 3 or 4 years? What tends to happen is new technology comes out, better technology comes out, and you replace your mobile phone every few years. Whereas if you were to ask someone 20 years ago or 25 years ago how often they replace their phone, or even the old brick mobile phones, they probably would have said never. They're still on their first phone. Okay, so just goes to show how research and development is fundamental to driving change in an organization. Refining business processes. So again, that's all about making sure that what you're doing is the most effective, the most efficient way to deliver that product or service. Okay, so it's all about ensuring that your processes are maximizing the return on your investment. They're maximizing the potential of your resources. to leverage our networks and alliances. So we already spoke about this, the use of technology for networking. No longer do you need to carry out business trips to the other side of the world, racking up thousands of pounds, firstly in cost, but also carbon emissions and damage to the planet. You can now just log into a conference call, speak to your subsidiary other side of the world. You know, your business doesn't necessarily have to meet in the one place. You can do it virtually using online networks and leverage some of the potential that technology offers. You can develop market access. So again, technology allows companies to access markets that might not have been possible previously. I'll give you an example. A small SME working here in Glasgow in Scotland, previously without the advent of Instagram shopping and the ability to sell on social media, they thought it's too expensive to set up a website, it's too expensive to set up a supply chain to deal with online sales. Nowadays, they simply sell using the platform Instagram. They're very, very clear and transparent to their customers that are shopping from abroad that shipping costs will vary depending on, you know, their country of origin. So again, things like that have made it so much easier for businesses, including small SMEs that only have one or two people working there, to access a much wider market. Okay, so technology is important. And finally, we've got active customer engagement. So things like ERP systems or customer relations management systems, CRM systems, these are all important because they allow a business to keep in touch with the customer. These systems flag when a customer hasn't had contact. These customers flag if there's an error or an issue with a customer's order. So this is why businesses invest hundreds of thousands, if not sometimes millions of pounds, in upgrading their ERP and CRM systems, because they want to have the latest technology that allows them to manage their customer expectations better. Okay, so that's all about the technocratic system. We then have what we call the sociosystemic system, and we talked about this as well. How does that work? Well, it's all about improving work practices. It's all about making sure that people know what they're doing, they're trained, they're equipped, they're skilled, just giving them the necessary resources to do their job. So it's all about improving their work practice. It's about creating protected space. So again, for innovation to work, your people need to feel comfortable and safe that, you know, they can make an error, they can make a mistake, because no person ever, including some of the most successful businesses in the world, you know, Jeff Bezos and Amazon, or even Tim Cook nowadays, or previously Steve Jobs with Apple, they'll all tell you that in order to get to where they are today, they had to make a lot of mistakes. They had to learn from those mistakes. They had to do things the difficult way. And that's true. Businesses need to be able to give their employees space to make mistakes. Now, that's not to say that, you know, you should give your employees the opportunity to, you know, potentially throw millions of pounds down the drain. Absolutely not. You would have some sort of control, some sort of risk mechanism in place. But the idea is, if you can create a safe space for your employees to experiment, to try and come up with new ways of doing things, to innovate, to collaborate, then you will probably get a better return, because people will come up with new ideas, and B, people will feel more comfortable. They feel safer knowing that, you know, the business isn't looking for them to be perfect always. The business wants them to make mistakes and learn from them, and try and mitigate them going forward. So creating a safe space is quite important. And some of the biggest companies that do that include the likes of Google. Google have, on a Friday afternoon, everyone in the Google office leaves their desk. They go into what's called their collaboration space, and they spend time just coming up with new ideas. They play around with new technologies. They try and work out what the future is going to look like. And at the end of the day, no one says to them, you know, why is your idea rubbish, or why does your idea not work? That all Google care about is the innovation. They care about the collaboration. They care about that process of people talking to each other and coming up with new ideas, because they know for every 100 ideas that fail, there will be one idea that succeeds, and one idea that does very, very well. And that's how Google and other such big tech companies continue to innovate. They continue to change. They continue to stay ahead of the market when it comes to innovations and technologies. It's about expanding and deepening capabilities. So this is all about making sure that people are equipped. Okay, so capabilities. If anyone wants to read up more on them, come from what's called a resource-based view. Now, it's all about making sure that your resources are maximized for their potential. Okay, that's what we mean. So there's another perspective called dynamic capabilities, and that's by a scholar called David Teese. He writes quite openly about what he calls dynamic capabilities, those bundles of resources, as he calls them, that must combine, that must interact in order for a value to be realized. Okay, so capabilities is all about the unique bundle of resources, land, labor, capital, um, enterprise, etc., combining to deliver a product or a service. Inspiring trust and loyalty. So again, businesses that are good at making sure that customers trust them, that making sure that employees feel wanted, employees feel valued by the business, tend to be those that succeed because they build relationships. Okay, they build um, trust with their customers, they build loyalty with their employees, they build a culture whereby it feels like a family as opposed to a workplace. Okay, so it's all about inspiring that level of trust and loyalty. It's about enhancing knowledge and communication. So again, it's about making sure that employees understand technology is changing. There's new ways in which customers want to deal with companies. Gone are the days when people would say, I want to go to the shop to make a complaint. Very rarely do customers do that nowadays. Nowadays, it's about calling the customer services team. You would call them to make your complaint or to raise a query, or if you have a question, you would maybe even use web chat. I don't know if anyone's used the web chat function for any brand they like. So you can ask questions to web chat. Nowadays, some companies have invested in artificial intelligence. So when you ask a question on web chat, it's not even a human being that answers you, it's a robot. It's an augmented reality device. So again, it's about making sure that employees are trained, they know how to deal with these systems, and know how to respond to customers best using these different types of systems. And finally, promoting ideas and identity. So again, employees are the front line of a business. When you go to shop with a particular brand, when you go to shop with a particular, um, a particular retailer or a particular store, the employees are what give you the first impression of that business. The business doesn't talk to you. For example, if you go to a Zara store to buy clothes, I mean, Zara doesn't speak to you. Zara's just a shop, okay? You just go into it. It's the employees that work there. They're the ones that give you the first impression of what the business is like. Are they courteous? Are they polite? Do they, help me? Do they try and, find solutions for me, or are they just, there to do a job and that's it? They don't really care about the customer. So again, the socio-systemic system is all about infusing the culture within your employees, the culture within your business, so that you can promote that brand identity to your customers. So that's all. So essentially, what I want to take away from this slide is the purpose of a business is deliver strategy, and how it does that is by combining the technocratic system with the socio-systemic system to deliver on some of those elements that are highlighted in the circles. Okay, so the strategy could be to reduce cost, it could be to boost innovation, it could be to make more reliable products, or to create more long-lasting relationships, or to improve a number of channels, or it could just be to enhance the brand reputation. These are all examples of strategies. These aren't the only examples, there's lots more in the world, but these are just some that I've given you here to give you an idea of how the technocratic system and the socio-systemic system combine to deliver strategy. What else can we say about a business? Well, what about its character? Now, you might be thinking, well, how can a business have a character? But it can. Okay, a business doesn't speak, itself, but a business can have certain elements or certain characteristics that make it more or less sociable or humane, as the case may be. So the people orientation part. Now, not all businesses are good at this. Some businesses are extremely bad at looking after their people. Others are very, very good. They care about their people. So people orientation is very, very important. It gives a business character. It gives the business personality. And if you're looking to join a new company or looking to move jobs, the first thing you will do is look at what are people saying? What are people saying about working for this company? Is it a good company to work for? Do they offer certain benefits? Do they care about their employees? What's the working environment like? These are all things that are important to you. So that's all about the people orientation. The guiding rules or principles, again, what does the business believe in? What is the business looking to try and achieve? I mean, yes, we all know the business wants to make a profit, but what about from a social perspective? What's the business looking to do? And that's quite important. We also have what we call the satisfaction of human needs. So again, this ties into people orientation. Does the business do the right thing by its people? And that's not to say that, does the business pay them what they want? Because obviously, if you ask someone how much they want to be paid, they would say, the absolute maximum, £100 an hour, £500 an hour. That's not feasible. But does it actually satisfy the needs of the person? Does it deliver a safe working environment? Does it offer people the chance to express themselves, to really kind of try and make an impact in the business? These are the kind of things we're talking about here. Obviously, the profit objectives. How vigorously are they pursuing profits? How important are profits to this business? That has a part to play in its character. The legal entity of the business. So what's that? That's a legal structure. Okay, so again, I'll cover this in more detail soon, but you can be a sole trader, you can be a partnership, you can be a public limited company, or you can be a private limited company. So there's lots and lots of ways in which a business can be structured. There's other elements such as the products and services it provides. So again, depending on what products and services it provides, you can tell a lot about a business. So for example, a business that works in, I don't know, say the adult entertainment industry, it'll have a certain type of character. Whereas a business that works in providing children's toys, again, it'll have a certain type of character and personality that'll be very, very different, okay? So it's just thinking about the nature of the products and services that also gives the business its character. Structure and hierarchy, that's all about, how does the business operate? How many layers of control or management power are there? And finally, the internal and the external environment. So again, we talked a little bit about this earlier, but what is the internal environment of the business like compared to the external environment? These are important elements of characteristics that we need to be aware of. Oh, my laptop seems to have frozen. Next screen. Okay. So business ownership forums. So again, I just talked about this very, very briefly already, but let's look at the chart on the right. So 4, generally speaking, unique forms of organizational structure or legal entity. A sole proprietor or a sole proprietorship is all about a one-man business, basically, okay? So you run the business, you take full liability for how that business operates. You do not have to report your annual accounts. You don't have to show anyone. You're not accountable to anyone. It's up to you how you run your business. Yes, there'll be certain laws and regulations that you need to abide by. So if you're employing people, you have to pay them a wage. You have to pay, income tax contributions, etc. So there's certain things you have to do. But at the end of the day, whatever money you make it for yourself. You don't have to disclose that to anyone else. You're a sole trader. You have full control over your business. However, there's also other forms that can sometimes be more beneficial. One of the biggest drawbacks of being a sole trader is you have what's called unlimited liability. That basically means if your business goes bust or if your business goes bankrupt, you as a sole trader become liable for covering its debts. So you have to dip into your savings, you have to dip into your assets. So you might end up losing your house, you might end up losing your car in order to cover your business's debts. So a sole trader is quite a dangerous structure, but it does mean that you have full control over your business. No one can tell you what to do, how to do it, etc., etc. The second form is what's called a general partnership. Now, a general partnership is a business that's usually owned by 2 or more people. I believe it's a maximum of 20 people that can make up a partnership. So usually it's quite similar to a sole trader, but the only difference is with a partnership, you don't just have one owner, you have multiple owners, 2 or more, okay? And in that context, decision-making is shared, profits are shared, you're accountable to each other. So if 1 or more people on the call today was in a partnership with me, then I would be holding you accountable. You would be holding me accountable. Okay, so there's an element of accountability. But similar to sole trader, you don't have to worry about publishing your accounts. Okay, accounts can stay the business of the partners. No one else needs to know. Sometimes another benefit of being in a partnership is banks are more likely to lend you money because banks know that more than one person can cover the debts, whereas one person as a sole trader might struggle to cover debts. So it can be easier to secure financing if you are a partnership compared to a sole trader. So that's something also to be aware of. But similar to a sole trader, partnership also has unlimited liability. So each partner is liable to pay if the business goes bust. I guess the only thing is the risk is shared rather than kept onto one person. Okay. Now we get into the more complex organizational structures. So we have a corporation. Now, a corporation tends to be something like a PLC. Okay. Now, what we mean by that is things like large corporations such as Ford Motor Cars, large corporations such as IBM, Microsoft. These are all very, very large corporations, okay? Now, these are very, very unique structures because they have the ability to amass a lot of finance. Why? How do they do that? Well, they issue shares, and by issuing shares, they're able to generate a lot more revenue, so not a lot more finance or capital. Okay, so that's a PLC. They're accountable to shareholders, and shares, as I said, can be sold in the millions. There's companies that have millions of shares issued on the stock market. So again, that's their way of raising finance. But we also then have the consideration for what's called limited liability companies. These are called private limited companies. And what they do are they very much keep things in-house. So they are a legal entity, but they don't issue shares in the private market. Sorry, they don't issue shares in the public market. They're issued privately. So people can hold shares, but they're very, very limited. And those limited shareholders are the ones that are responsible for the business. Again, a private limited company is good for legal purposes. If you set up a private limited company, your personal liability is limited to how much you invest. So if you invest £100,000 in the business and the business fails and it has debts of over £1 million, well, you're no longer responsible because only thing you will lose is the £100,000 you invested. You wouldn't lose any more than that. You are not personally liable for the business. Okay, so unlike a sole trader, unlike a partnership, you are not responsible for covering the debts or the obligations of the business. So that's a little bit around the legal structures and the different forms of business ownership. We also have types of business classifications. So again, I'm not going to insult your intelligence. I'm sure you're all aware of small, medium, large enterprises. But in general, here in Europe and in the UK, we use the following definitions. A micro business or a micro SME is any business that employs up to 9 people. So 0 to 9 people. You could be a micro business all by yourself. You could be the owner. You could be the person that's producing the goods and services and selling them. That's still a micro business. Or you could have up to 9 people working for you. That's still a micro business. Small businesses usually are between 10 to 49 people. So again, anything from 10 people all the way up to 49 people, you would classify as a small business. Who's going to buy the products? The only reason a business produces a product is because there's a need for it, there's a want for it. If that need and want disappears, then there's no point in that business really being there, okay, because no one's going to buy the products. So how do you review the customer's needs and wants, and how do you deliver what the customer wants? Well, it's what's called the customer value chain, okay? So how's that done? Well, it's a combination of what's called your primary activities and your support activities. that come together to deliver on the value proposition offered to your customers. So if we look at the primary activities along the bottom first, that's looking at the key functions or the key areas of the business that the customer is concerned about or that concerns the customer. So inbound logistics, how quickly you can get your supplies to your warehouse in order for you to start making them. That's important because if a customer is going to buy, for example, a sofa or a large product from you, he or she wants to know how long it's going to take for you to source the fabric, make the sofa and deliver it to them. Okay, so inbound logistics is important. We then have operations. Operations is basically your manufacturing and your production. So you take those inputs from inbound logistics, you turn them into the product or the good and service that you sell, and then you outbound them, which means you send them away. Okay, it's all about logistics. It's all about how do you get your product to your customer, or how do you get it to the local warehouse. So if you have a big factory in, I don't know, say Germany, and your customer's based in the UK, how quickly can you get it to the UK warehouse ready for it to be sold or delivered to the customer? Once it's ready to be delivered, then your marketing and sales team are responsible for calling the customer, arranging delivery, and getting the product to the customer's door. And then finally, you've got after sales service. These are the 5 functional areas that the customer value proposition is realized. Okay, you also have HR, you also have accounting and finance, but the customer doesn't care about that because the customer doesn't realize any benefit of HR or benefit of accounting and finance. The customer cares about how do you make the product or service that he or she has ordered, and how quickly can you get it to them and provide them with after sales support. Okay, so these are what's called your primary activities. What you also have are what's called your support activities, or sometimes called secondary activities. Now these are things like the infrastructure. What technologies do you have in place? What infrastructure is available for your business to operate? What is your HRM, your human resources management?
Yes.
What is the technology that you employ?
Yeah.
And finally, the procurement. How quick and easy is it for you to procure resources?
Visit.
Combining both your primary and support activities, there'll be costs involved. Okay, so it costs you money to bring products in, it costs you money to run your manufacturing process, it costs you money to get the product ready for delivery, it costs you money to hire people that deal with selling the product or deal with after sales. These all cost money. Secondary services also cost money, and then on top of that you need to make a profit, so there's a margin involved. The combination of all of that combined is what equals your value proposition. Okay, so that is what you're offering your customer. So for some fixed price, you are offering them all of that in terms of getting the product through that process and to their front door. Okay, so that's what's called the value chain of an organization, and that is how a business sets about satisfying the needs and wants of its customers. Another few things for you to be aware of. How do you align the business model and the value proposition? So the business model is essentially the structure. So the business model is how the business does what it's meant to do. And your role, if you're working in that capacity, is to align the business model with the value proposition. So it's about ensuring that what your business is doing internally matches up with what the customer is looking for. How does the value proposition get realized? Because you've structured your business the correct way. So these are some of the things that you might want to keep in mind. So starting from the bottom, your business will have some kind of vision for the future, okay? Some strategy, some objective, some mission that you're looking to achieve. As part of your business model, you will try to reduce your costs. You want to keep costs low. You will innovate. You will try to look for new ways and better ways of doing things. You will try to become a reliable supplier or a reliable business that people can trust. You'll try to build relationships with your customers. You'll make sure that you try and reach your customers through as many channels as possible, whether that's face-to-face, through telemarketing, through online social media sales, through word of mouth, whatever the channel may be. And then finally, your brand. How do you maintain and enhance your brand reputation? These are all fundamental parts of your business model. And how do they get realized from a value proposition perspective? Well, it just depends on what you're looking to do, really. So under price, in order for you to cover your costs, you need to charge your customer a price. Now, what price you charge depends on your business model. What do I mean by that? Well, if you're making Ferraris or Lamborghini cars, chances are you're a premium price product, okay? You're going to be charging a very high price for a luxury product. Whereas if you're someone that's producing HP pencils, so you're selling pencils that people buy to use, then chances are you're probably going to be either what's called a price leader or at least competitive in your price. So that means you're going to try and charge an equal price to your competition. There's other people that produce pencils. They're also going to be charging a fairly low price. So you'll want to charge a low price as well. Otherwise, you'll be charging too much. Nobody will buy from you. So the business model that you adopt for cost will depend on the nature of the goods and services you're providing. Oh, sorry, what have I done? The nature of the goods and services you're providing, and also on the cost elements in terms of what the customer is willing to pay. Okay, so that's something to bear in mind for value proposition when it comes to cost. When it comes to innovation, it's all about the features of the product. Now, again, some customers don't care about all singing, all dancing. Some customers just want a product that does the basic job. So, for example, take a TV. Now, my grandparents are not very technology savvy. When they buy a television, all they want is a television that can connect to a DVD player, that can connect to the Skybox, and they can watch what they want to watch. They don't care about smart TV. They don't care about the apps that come on the TV. They don't even care about 4K technology, because for them, all TVs are the same. They just want a standard basic television that connects to their devices and lets them watch their favorite episodes or their favorite dramas or whatever they want to watch. Okay, so they would be what you would call as basic feature customers. Okay, so if you're innovating, you don't need to worry about all singing, all dancing products with them. They just care about the basic. However, there'll be some customers that want customized products. Okay, they will want you to not only make the state-of-the-art television, they might have a lot of money and they might ask you, can I get this imprinted or personalized with my name? Can I have it, built into my wall? Can I have it, there are different functions, there are different technologies that they might want to play around with. So again, these are the customers that you probably charge a premium price to, because they're asking for a lot more, but you will have to customize the product. You'll have to make it to their needs. So that's called innovating with your business model. Then we have quality. Now, this ties in with the reliability component. Again, depending on the type of product and the price that you're charging, there's a certain element of quality expected. So again, let's go back to the example of making cars and making pencils. If you're someone that is producing Lamborghini cars and you're selling them to high-end customers for a premium price, well, those customers will be expecting excellent quality. Okay, they'll be wanting the best quality leathers, the best quality components and parts used in their cars. They'll be wanting the product to be very, very luxurious. Whereas if you're producing HP pencils that are being sold to children to use in school, or people to use, then realistically, people don't really care about excellent quality pencils unless you're an artist who specializes in drawing with pencils. Generally speaking, the public don't really care about the quality of the pencil. They just want a pencil that can be used to write with. Okay, so the quality criteria falls, but so does the price and so does the features. So the business model itself can be adapted, okay, to meet those needs. And that can be applied all the way through, whether it's for the support function, the availability function, or the reputation function of the value proposition. But essentially what you want to do is you want to make sure that your business model is aligned with your price. So I'll give you the example of, for example, if you're producing pencils and you've got a high cost of producing pencils, so it costs you £5 to make one pencil, but you can only sell it for, I don't know, say 50 pence, then that's bad, because your business model does not align to your value proposition. You can't charge more than 50 pence because everyone else is charging 50 pence. However, it's costing you £5. So for each pencil you make and sell, you're making a loss of £4.50. So your business model is failing. Okay, so it's important that your business model reflects on your value proposition. And how does it align? Well, again, this is bringing everything we've done together. So at the very, very top, you've got a socio-systemic system. At the very bottom, you've got your technocratic system. You've then got your business model designs from a technology and a socio-systemic perspective. And then in the middle, you've got how the value proposition comes together. Now, if I start to explain this, I probably would be here all afternoon, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I will touch, for example, on the very first column. So at the top, you've got socio-systemic system. It's all about improving work practices. So why do you want to improve work practices? Well, you want to make sure that you're producing at the lowest cost possible. You want to minimize your costs in order to make as much profit as possible. So if you improve work practices, you make people better at doing what they're doing, you reduce any inefficiencies, you reduce any losses in the system, okay? So the cost comes down. Similarly, from a technocratic perspective, from the bottom up, we've got optimizing the value chain. Why do you want to optimize the value chain? Well, you want to do that so that you can, as much as possible, charge a higher price as you can. Why is that important? Because you want to be able to show your customer that your product's the best, your product delivers the most value, and therefore it's worth the price you're charging. The combination of low cost and relatively good price would deliver you your value proposition, whether that's premium pricing, competitive pricing, or leadership pricing. Okay, so that's how this model comes together, and that can be done throughout each and every column that you see in front of you. So that's how you align your business model with your value proposition in order to deliver value. You can do what's called a business model needs analysis. And what this means is you basically rate how your business is performing today. So for example, if we look at the first element, price, it might currently be performing at level 1, but you want to move it to level 2. You want to make it better. So how do you do that? Well, you focus on your costs. You need to become more cost efficient. You need to use resources not as intensively. You need to focus on the best bundle of resources that can generate the low cost. You need to improve your systems for costing. You need to find ways to make your costing more efficient. Apologies, that was the door. Yes, so you need to improve your systems for costing, budgeting, planning to make it more efficient. Okay. Similarly, you can see the same about reputation, for support, for quality. All these concepts come together. Okay. How you rate it today and where you want to move it to are all important. So in order to, for example, improve the features of the product, you need to focus on the innovation part of your business model. In order to improve your reputation with your customers, you need to focus on the branding of your business, of your product, of who you are as a business reputation. Okay, so that's business model needs analysis. What about identification of projects and programs? Well, here we're looking specifically at different areas, both the technocratic side and the socio-systemic side. So how do you optimize your value chain? How do you redefine your business processes? How do you develop your market access? What part of the business model is affected? And in the middle, you've got the part of the business model that's being affected. Okay, so if you're optimizing your value chain, you're doing it because you want to reduce costs. How would you do it from a socio-systemic perspective? Well, you might look at performance management. You might look at ways of improving how performance works in your organization by improving work practices so that people are more efficient, they're not having as much wastage, they're not using up organizational resources without purpose. Similarly, if we look at the relationship component, if you want to leverage networks and alliances, you maybe want to partner with universities. So you've got students, people that are fairly clever coming through the education system. You want to be able to tap into those resources. You want to recruit them to your graduate program. You want to learn, from them around what's the latest trends. So you might want to do that to build relationships with the university. On the internal side, what you might want to do is look at how do you improve the career management and support that your business provides. What's the HR components involved in making sure career progression is there. Why would a university student want to join you? Well, you could do that by inspiring trust and loyalty. You show them that as a business, you do what's right by your customers. You create relationships. You try and get them on your side. Okay, so this is how the technocratic system and the socio-systemic system combine to deliver different elements of the business model. And how can we understand the business model? So you may have come across this in the past. This is the business model canvas done by Osterwalder and Pinier. Now they came up with what is sometimes abbreviated to the BMC, business model canvas. There's 9 key elements that come together to form the value proposition. You've got key partners, key activities, key resources and costs. You have customer relationships, customers themselves, channels of reaching the market, and revenue streams. And all of these combined are what deliver you the value proposition. So let's think now about the environment of business. So business environment, as I said to you already, has 2 key components. You've got the internal environment and then you've got the external environment. With the internal environment, there's 5 M's model, which is usually a good way to remember. So number 1, man or woman. So, people basically, but you've got that as number 1. Number 2 is material. Number 3 is money. Number 4 is machinery. And number 5 is management. Anything to do with those 5 M's, as they're called, is all about the internal environment. It's all about what your business is seeking to do internally. All of these are usually within the control of the business. So as a business manager or a leader in the business, you can decide how you want your people to work. You can decide what materials you want to employ. You can decide how much money you want to invest. You can decide what machinery you're going to buy and how you're going to use it. And you can decide on how management will work, what the management controls, the procedures, the processes. Okay, so internal environment, all about the 5 M's. What about the external environment? So here we're looking at things like the government and legal factors. We're looking at geophysical factors. We're looking at political factors, sociocultural, demographic, and finally the general business environment that's outside of your organization. So anything that happens outside the 4 walls of your business is considered part of the external environment. So you may have heard of a model called the Pestel model that looks at political, economic, social, technical, environmental and legal perspectives. So it's all about what is going on external to your business that might impact on how your business works. And part of that is all about different types of environments. Now, you've got obviously the external, which is everything outside, but not everything outside impacts you. So you can have what's called a micro environment or a micro external environment, which is that small business or environment outside of your business that directly affects your capacity to work. Usually your micro environment consists of people like suppliers, customers, market intermediaries or third-party agents, competition, and your general local community. Okay, these are the people that perhaps your business has to deal with on a fairly regular basis, and you have to make sure that you're managing their expectations. You can't control them. You can't control your suppliers or your customers or your competitors, but you can manage them. You can try to work with them. You can try to make sure that you're not left behind by what they're doing. And then you've got a breakdown of who these people are. So suppliers, customers, these are all important people. So if we think about the industry, so now looking at external to your business, okay, so these are things you can't control. So this is basically a simplified version of what an industry is, okay? So in the very, very middle, I don't know if you can see that, it's a very, very small version of the business model and the value proposition, okay? So there you are as a business in between. You exchange goods and services for money. That's what you do, okay? You make goods and services, you sell them on the market, and customers give you money. So that's what you're doing. At the very fundamental level, that's what's going on. So what are you doing as a business? Well, you're selling to the market. And a market usually tends to be a collection of buyers. So customers, from all over the world, customers from different places that are looking to buy from you. It's a collection of buyers. What happens? Well, the buyers usually communicate to the industry that they want something, they have a need that hasn't been fulfilled, or they have a want that they want to buy something. And the industry, which you're a part of, but you're just one small part because there's lots and lots of sellers, is there to try and sell to the market. And how do they do that? They provide information. You know, I'll tell you about what I'm doing, what I'm selling. I'll tell you what my role is. I'll tell you what my business can do for you. So I'll give you information. And it's basically a constant flow, okay? Industry gives information. The market communicates back to industry. Once the market's decided what it wants to buy, it consumes the goods and services by paying the industry money for those goods and services. Okay, and that's basically how the industry model works. Now let's look at the business sectors, or what are also called economic sectors. So on the very left-hand side, you have primary sectors of industry. The primary sectors are very kind of traditional sectors. You're looking here at almost the kind of laborious markets: mining, agriculture, livestock, drilling, logging, etc. These industries very much involve heavy labor-intensive jobs. Okay, it's all about manual labor. Now, obviously, these jobs still exist. You know, agriculture still exists in most countries around the globe. Mining in countries that are resource rich, livestock, you know, farming, etc. These are all big industries all across the globe. So primary sector still exists, but it's not as big as it used to be. We also have what's called the secondary sector. The secondary sector is somewhat related to the primary, but it's not the same level of labor intensive work. So with the secondary sector, it tends to be that the materials that's produced by the primary sector are then turned into goods and services by the secondary sector. So what do I mean by that? So for example, somebody working in the mining sector in the primary sector may be drilling for coal or gas or oil. Once they've extracted the coal, gas and oil, it then gets moved along. Somebody working for British Petroleum or Shell or one of the other big oil companies, Gazprom, they would then turn the coal or gas into something that's useful. So that's called a secondary sector, okay? They manufacture the goods and services out of the raw materials that the primary sector uncovers, okay? So component goods, or even sometimes finished goods, are made by the secondary sector, okay? And there's lots of countries that do that, lots of companies as well. Companies like Coca-Cola, Honda, etc. can all be explained to be secondary sector, okay? Coca-Cola takes the raw materials that are taken from the cocoa beans, that are taken from sugar, that's taken from the different materials that go into Coca-Cola, and they combine it. So they work in what's called a secondary sector. You then have what's called a tertiary sector. Now, the tertiary sector is all about services. It's about professional services, but also retail and other types of service. So when you go to buy something and you speak to someone in the shop, they're what's called a tertiary sector worker, okay, or the third sector. They work in, basically, their work is selling, or their work is providing a service, such as customer service, or trying to assist you with your query. That's all about tertiary sector. And finally, we have more recently what's called the quaternary sector. Now, the quaternary sector is basically this: it's when you come to get educated, okay? So education, libraries, scientific research, this all involves what's called intellectual activity, okay? It's about the transfer of knowledge, it's about creating new knowledge, it's about creating opportunities. So the quaternary sector is all about intellectual services. For example, large consulting firms that help businesses get through tough periods, you could argue they're also part of the quaternary sector because they're there to provide an intellectual service, an intellectual activity. They're selling their what they know, they're selling their technologies, they're selling their manpower to help your business succeed. So why are these business industry sectors important? Well, we talked about primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary sectors, but within each of them, you also have what's called the voluntary sector, the private sector, and the public sector. So in each of them, you will have organizations that work on behalf of the public, so government organizations. You will have private enterprise, and you will have a voluntary or a social enterprise who help or try to deliver on a particular need or a want. Okay, so these are three different types of businesses or three different sectors of business that will exist in your primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary industries. Okay, we already had a break, so I'm going to skip into the next part. Now, I appreciate that a lot of you attended the business ethics class, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but as part of the business environment, the three pillars of corporate sustainability are important. So why is that important? Because the combination of these things is what makes a sustainable business. And sustainability, particularly at this time, is more important than ever before. We want to make sure that we're looking after the earth that we live in. And how do we do that? We do that by ensuring that what we do as a business is sustainable. We're not polluting the environment any more than we should or could. We are not intentionally creating products that harm the environment or harm wildlife. We're not creating products by pursuing, for example, child labor or abusing different work rights of different people. It's about being sustainable. How do you do that? Well, there's a few different ways, but one of the kind of more prominent methods, one of the more prominent definitions, I should say, for CSR is around the combination of business, society, and environment. How do the three of them combine? How do we work out a middle ground between the three of them? And that feeds into what we call social issues. It feeds into labour issues and it feeds into human rights. So for a business, it's all about making sure that you're paying the right wages. You're looking after your employees by making them work fair hours. You're giving them the necessary environment. Their working conditions are good. They've got the equipment they need to do their job. They have freedom of association. They can join trade unions. They can express their opinions mostly in a free manner. They're free from discrimination. They're not being forced to work, and of course child labour, which is increasingly becoming important even in developing countries where perhaps these practices are more prevalent. Different philosophical perspectives. I'm not going to cover these in detail, but it's different philosophies that underpin these perspectives. So how do we as business owners concern ourselves with the nature of business? How do we understand the nature of business? And these are just 5 potential philosophical positions. There's more in the world. What are the benefits of CSR? Again, it's about making sure that you as a business is seen to do the right thing. It's about ensuring that your reputation, your brand image, your ability to attract people, your ability to get people to buy from you, to work for you, is managed appropriately. And that's just a benefit to you. There's a benefit to the planet of you being CSR, or you being CSR friendly, or you being sustainable, because by doing that, you're able to gain a competitive advantage for your business. People want to buy from you, but you're also doing a social good. You're actually protecting the environment. You're protecting the planet that we all live on. How can businesses engage with CSR? So Dalsrud's 2008 5 dimensions model is quite useful. These are different areas that businesses may want to look into if they want to engage in CSR practices. Carroll's CSR pyramid is a useful way for us to break this down further. There's this example of CSR strategy using tobacco. So tobacco industry originally, for example, refused to accept the link between poor health or poor lungs, etc., as a result of smoking. Eventually, it accepted liability. Then eventually it accommodated that by making sure that they were doing what they could to discourage people from smoking. And then they took pro action as well. So they finally thought, okay, we need to do something we have a responsibility from an ethical perspective, from a moral perspective, to do the right thing by these people. And that leads into what's called corporate governance. Corporate governance is all about the way in which companies are directed and controlled. And that's important to the business environment, because if you're running a business enterprise, it's not just about making a profit. It's not just about having structure in your organization. It's about having the right structure. It's about doing what's right. It's about being held accountable for your actions. And corporate governance is a way to do that. Things can go very, very wrong. So with governance, sometimes you see, and this happens more regularly than it should, organizations that get into trouble because they've been implicated in bribery, coercion, insider trading. There's conflicts of interest that may arise, unfair discrimination, political donations and gifts, etc., etc. These are examples of bad governance in practice. An example that I tend to use quite regularly is the Apple Foxconn example. So Foxconn is a Chinese manufacturer that produced Apple mobile phones. Unfortunately, with the situation that Apple found themselves in, they weren't paying the right wages, this company, to the workers that are making Apple iPhones. On top of that, they were working longer hours than they should have been, 12, 14, 16-hour shifts. It led to a lot of them committing suicide, unfortunately. People were under stress situations. They committed suicide, and many people lost their lives. Okay, so this is just one example. There's multiple examples of such bad governance in other companies too. So what part of governance is important to us? Well, making sure that we hold businesses accountable, making sure that businesses are being fair in what they do. It's making sure businesses are being transparent, they're not hiding things. Of course, there'll be certain elements that need to be kept secret, that's to be expected, but a business is clear about its intentions. That's what I mean by transparency. And finally, responsibility. Who's going to take responsibility? Who's going to be responsible for delivering on stakeholders' needs, stakeholders' rights, etc., etc. Ethical governance. So as part of corporate governance, you have what's called ethical governance. Again, those that attending my business ethics lecture will have a better idea of what these are, but it's all about making sure that you have a clear code of conduct. It's about carrying out risk assessments. It's about setting penalties. If your business doesn't abide, what's the penalties? How are people going to be charged? How are people going to be punished for not following the rules? Here's an example of a slum in Siberia. So this is a company called Johari. They transformed this slum from what's on the left to what's on the right. Okay, so they provided safe working environments. They provided the infrastructure. They provided the technology for the workers in the slum to produce clothing garments. Now, these clothing garments, just so you know, were provided to H&M. So if anyone shops with H&M, this is where H&M get their clothes, or partly get their clothes from. This is one of their production centers based in Kenya. So look at what it used to be. Clothes that you buy on the shop floor in H&M, this is where they used to be made. Thanks to Johari, the workers that work in these places now have the necessary environment, they have the necessary conditions, they have the necessary technology to be able to do their job effectively. Finally, that brings me on to stakeholders. Stakeholders are important because these are the people that are involved both directly and indirectly with a business. Now, stakeholders can be both inside and outside the company. Why? Because they all have a vested interest in what the business is doing and what solution the business has to any problems it's facing. So what do we mean by that? Well, usually a stakeholder is anyone that is either positively or negatively impacted by or can cause an impact on the actions of a business. He or she is said to be a stakeholder. And why are they important? Well, you need to know who your stakeholders are in order to manage them, okay? So if you don't know who your stakeholders are, then you don't know who you're offending, who you're not offending, who you're looking after, who you're catering for, and who you need to be aware of in order to deliver your products and services. So you need to identify them. You need to think about who are all the people whether it's customers, suppliers, the government, the local community, your managers, your employees, third-party logistics companies. All of these people are important for you and your business. You need to understand what their needs and interests are. Why do they care about you? What do they care about your business? For example, your supplier might have certain needs and wants that are very, very different to your customer, okay? Your supplier wants to make sure that you are buying goods and services from them. Your customer wants to make sure that you're selling it to them, okay? So again, very, very different needs and wants. You need to be able to identify where there are synergies between those potential stakeholders. Do they care about the same thing? Do they care about different things? How can you group them together? How can you separate them? These are all things that you need to be able to do in a stakeholder analysis. And then finally, you need to be able to understand who you need to manage and when. And the best way to do that is through what's called a power interest matrix. So it's a 2x2 grid that allows you to map your stakeholders based on their power in terms of how much sway they have over your business, and their interest, how much they care about your business. Okay, high power, high interest tend to be stakeholders that are directly involved. So people like leaders, senior managers, they tend to be people that are highly powerful and highly interested in what your business is doing. People that are low power, low interest tend to be people like the media, so tabloid